A cold silence stretched across the empty void of space. Among the countless stars, a single distress signal drifted, weak and broken. It had been traveling for months, maybe even years, lost in the endless dark. No one had answered. No one had even heard it. Until now. Captain Ray Carter sat inside his ship, the Starfire, staring at his control panel. His fingers hovered over the glowing screen, his heart beating faster as he listened to the signal. It was faint, almost lost in the background noise of space, but it was there. A voice. A desperate, trembling voice. Help, please, someone. The words were barely understandable, but Ray knew one thing. It was not human. The voice belonged to someone else. Someone afraid. Someone alone. Its ship's AI, EKKO, spoke in its calm, robotic tone. Unknown transmission detected. Language partially decoded. No known response from other vessels. Ray leaned forward, adjusting the frequency. Can you trace the source? A pause. Then, the AI responded. The signal is coming from a dead planet. Location: Sector X-93, uninhabited for over a century. Ray frowned. A dead planet. No life. Then who was calling for help? He hesitated. Space was dangerous. It was filled with pirates, scavengers, and worse. This could be a trap. But something about the voice. It didn't sound like a trick. It sounded real. He closed his eyes for a moment. Every instinct told him to ignore it. Keep flying. Stay safe. Don't take unnecessary risks. But his gut told him something else. He sighed. Set a course for Sector X-93. Let's see who's out there. After a few hours of hyperspace travel, the Starfire dropped out of light speed. Before Ray stretched a dark and broken world, a planet covered in thick clouds, its surface barely visible. His scanners beeped, confirming what the AI had said. No signs of life. No cities. No signals. Yet, someone had sent a distress call from here. Ray piloted his ship toward the surface. The closer he got, the clearer he could see. This place was once a civilization. Massive ruins of buildings stretched for miles, broken and covered in dust. Craters and burned structures told the story of a war long lost. As he landed, his ship's eye spoke again. Warning. High radiation detected. Proceed with caution. Ray grabbed his helmet, sealed his suit, and stepped out. The air was thin and cold. The silence was unnatural. It was as if the whole planet was holding its breath. Then his communicator crackled. A weak, trembling voice whispered, hello. Ray froze. The voice wasn't coming from his ship. It was coming from the ruins. Someone was here. Ray followed the voice through the destroyed city, his boots crunching against the dead ground. He passed fallen towers, rusted vehicles, and shattered glass. Everything was abandoned, lifeless. But then he saw it. A small, hidden entrance in the side of a collapsed building. The distress signal was coming from inside. His heart pounded as he stepped in. The tunnel was dark, the air heavy with dust. He activated his suit's flashlight and moved forward. Then, in the faint glow, he saw her. A young alien girl sat against the wall, her silver blue skin bruised, her glowing eyes filled with fear. She looked weak, exhausted, as if she had been hiding for a long time. She gasped when she saw him, trying to push herself back. Ray raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. Hey, it's okay. I heard your distress call. The girl stared at him, unsure whether to trust him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You're human. Ray nodded. Yeah, and I think you need help. She looked at him for a long moment. Then her eyes filled with tears, and she did something unexpected. She reached out her trembling hand and begged, "Please, don't leave me." Ray felt something tighten in his chest. Whoever this girl was, whatever had happened here, one thing was clear. She was the last of her kind, and he was the only one who had heard her cry. Ray stared at the trembling alien girl, her glowing eyes filled with exhaustion and fear. He could see the hesitation in her expression, the battle between hope and distrust. She had been alone for too long. He knelt, keeping his movements slow. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently. "I heard your call for help." The girl clutched her arms, her small frame shivering despite the warmth inside the shelter. Her silver-blue skin was marked with dirt and bruises, and her long, delicate fingers trembled as she reached up to wipe her face. "You're human," she whispered again, as if she couldn't believe it. Ray nodded. "Yeah." Her lips parted slightly, her breath hitching. I thought no one would ever come." Ray's gaze softened. Whoever she was, she had been trapped here for a long time. He could only imagine what she had been through. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the entrance of the shelter, as if she expected something, or someone, to come crashing in at any moment. "They took everything," she whispered. "My family, my people, all gone." Ray felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. This planet had been marked as dead for over a century. If she was here, then something didn't add up. "Who?" he asked carefully. The girl swallowed hard. "The hunters." Ray's fingers instinctively tightened around the blaster at his hip. He had heard of the hunters before. Mercenaries, warlords, creatures that thrived on destruction. If they had wiped out her entire species, that meant she wasn't just some lost survivor. She was a target. "How long have you been hiding here?" The girl hugged her knees, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I lost track. My mother hid me before." She trailed off, her face crumbling as memories resurfaced. "Before they took her." Ray let out a slow breath. He had seen war. He had seen what power-hungry monsters could do to defenseless people. But to leave a child alone in the ruins of her world, that was something else. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden beep from his wrist communicator. Motion detected. Ray's body tensed. Someone, or something, was outside. The girl's eyes widened in panic. "They found me." Ray immediately turned off his flashlight and grabbed her wrist. "Come on. We need to move." The girl hesitated, fear holding her still. "They never leave survivors." "Then let's make sure today's the first time they fail." She swallowed hard but nodded. Ray led her deeper into the ruins, staying low. The shelter's broken walls barely hid them as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the dead city. The girl clung to his arm, her breathing shallow. Then came a low, mechanical voice. "Life's signatures detected. Initiating search." Ray cursed under his breath. He peeked through a crack in the wall and saw them. Tall figures in dark armor, their eyes glowing red beneath metallic helmets. The hunters. There were 3 of them, scanning the area with advanced tracking devices. Ray tightened his grip on his blaster. He had been in plenty of fights before, but this, he was outnumbered, and the girl wouldn't survive if a battle broke out. He turned to her. "Do you know another way out?" She nodded quickly and pointed toward a collapsed tunnel leading underground. "That way." Ray exhaled. It was a risk, but staying here wasn't an option. "Stay close," he whispered. They moved quickly, crawling through the narrow passage as dust and debris fell around them. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The girl shivered. "I don't like this place." Ray glanced around. "What's down here?" She swallowed. "The old city. No one ever goes in, because something lives down here." Before Ray could ask what she meant, a deep rumbling shook the tunnel. And then, from the darkness ahead, something growled. Ray froze. The deep, guttural growl echoed through the tunnel, sending a chill down his spine. He reached for his blaster, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. The girl beside him clutched his arm, her body trembling. "Something's down here," she whispered. Ray kept his voice low. "What is it?" She shook her head. "I don't know. My mother told me never to come this far. She said, 'The darkness eats those who enter.'" That wasn't exactly comforting. Another low, guttural sound rumbled ahead, followed by a slow, dragging noise. Ray's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but they had no choice. The hunters were above ground. Going back meant certain death. He glanced at the girl. "Stay close to me." She nodded, gripping his sleeve tightly. They moved forward, their footsteps barely making a sound. The tunnel walls were ancient, covered in strange markings, glowing faintly like dying embers. Whatever this place was, it had been abandoned for centuries. And yet, something still lived here. Ray's wrist communicator beeped softly. Movement detected. He glanced at the screen. The scanner picked up something massive ahead of them. Then, without warning, a deep hiss filled the air. Ray barely had time to react before something lunged from the shadows. He pushed the girl behind him and fired. A blue energy blast lit up the tunnel, revealing a massive creature with jagged limbs and hollow glowing eyes. It recoiled from the shot, letting out a deafening screech. The girl gasped. "It's awake." Ray didn't like the sound of that. The creature didn't attack again. It watched them, its hollow eyes flickering like dying stars. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts. "Outsiders, you should not be here." Ray's breath caught in his throat. He had faced plenty of dangers in the galaxy. Pirates, mercenaries, corrupt warlords. But this was something else. The girl trembled behind him. "Please, we mean no harm," she whispered. The creature shifted, its body unnaturally fluid, as if it was made of shadow and smoke. "You, the last one." It focused on the girl, its gaze piercing. "You carry the blood of the fallen. You should not exist." Ray stepped in front of her. "She's with me. We just need to get out of here." The creature remained still for a moment. Then it let out a low, haunting sigh. "There is no escape. The hunters have come. They bring death." Ray tensed. "We know. That's why we're hiding." The creature's hollow eyes flickered again. "They are searching, but not for you. They seek what was buried." The girl stiffened. "The old city." Ray narrowed his eyes. "What's down here?" The creature hesitated before whispering. "A secret the galaxy forgot." Then suddenly, the tunnel shook violently. The walls cracked, and dust rained from above. The hunters were using scanners and explosives. They were coming. Ray grabbed the girl's hand. "We need to move. Now." But the creature didn't let them go. It loomed over them, its form shifting like mist. "You seek escape, but you must make a choice." Ray frowned. "What choice?" The creature's voice turned to a whisper. "Flee and remain hunted forever, or stay and uncover the truth." The girl looked up at Ray, her eyes filled with fear. "What do we do?" Above them, the ground cracked open. Red searchlights pierced through the tunnel. The hunters had arrived. Ray had seconds to decide. Run or fight for something bigger than both of them. The air grew thick with dust as the ceiling trembled, loose debris crashing down around them. Ray tightened his grip on the girl's wrist and pulled her away from the widening cracks. Above them, the faint hum of approaching hunter drones sent a chill through his spine. The creature loomed before them, its hollow eyes flickering like dying embers. "Decide quickly, outsider," it urged. "Run and be hunted, or stay and uncover what was lost." Ray's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to run, to get out while they still could. But something in the creature's voice stopped him. He turned to the girl. "What's down here? What secret are they after?" Her face was pale, fear swimming in her silver eyes. "My mother never told me," she whispered. "She only said our people were forced to abandon this place, that something powerful was hidden beneath the city." Ray exhaled sharply. Powerful. That word alone was enough to attract every bounty hunter and warlord in the galaxy. If the hunters were willing to risk everything to retrieve whatever was buried here, it had to be more than just an artifact. Another explosion rocked the tunnel. The ground beneath them cracked. They had seconds before the hunters broke through. Ray made his decision. "We're staying." The girl gasped. "Ray, no time to argue." He cut her off. "If we run, they'll chase us across the stars. But if we find whatever they're after first, we might have a chance." The creature gave a slow nod, its form shifting like liquid shadow. "Then follow me." Without another word, it turned and glided deeper into the tunnel. Ray hesitated only for a second before pulling the girl along, his mind racing. He didn't trust the creature, but right now it was their only guide. The tunnel twisted and turned, narrowing until the walls pressed close. The glowing markings along the stone flickered as if reacting to their presence. The air was charged, heavy with an energy Ray had never felt before. Then, suddenly, they stepped into a massive chamber. Ray's breath caught in his throat. The room stretched beyond sight, ancient structures rising like silent sentinels. Floating glyphs shimmered in the air, shifting and rearranging themselves. At the center of it all, a massive monolith pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. The girl gasped. This is the core." Ray shot her a look. The core. She took a shaky step forward. "It was a legend among my people, a source of energy unlike anything in the galaxy. My mother said it was created to protect us, but it was abandoned when the war came." Ray narrowed his eyes. And now the hunters want it. A deep rumbling filled the chamber. The markings along the monolith flared brighter. The creature turned to them. "The core awakens." The girl hesitated, looking at Ray. "What do we do?" Before he could answer, the walls exploded. A blast of heat and debris knocked Ray to the ground. Red lights poured in through the dust. Hunter drones swarming into the chamber, their weapons primed. A tall, armored figure stepped through the smoke, his voice a cold snarl. "You should not have come here." Ray barely had time to reach for his blaster before the first shot fired. Ray rolled to the side just as a plasma bolt seared past him, scorching the ancient stone floor. The girl let out a sharp cry, ducking behind the monolith as the armored hunters poured into the chamber. The leader, clad in dark battle armor with glowing red optics, strode forward, his voice cold and mechanical. "You are interfering with matters beyond your understanding, human." His gaze shifted to the girl. "And you. Your kind should have perished long ago." Ray clenched his jaw. "Yeah. Well, I hate to disappoint." With a swift motion, he fired his blaster. The shot slammed into the hunter's chest plate, but instead of staggering, the alien absorbed the impact, the energy dispersing into his armor like ripples in water. Ray's stomach dropped. "That's new." The hunter raised his weapon. "You are outmatched." Before he could fire, the monolith reacted. The symbols floating in the air pulsed violently, as if sensing the threat. The entire chamber trembled, and then light erupted from the core. A shockwave sent everyone flying. Ray hit the ground hard, pain jolting through his ribs. He groaned, shaking off the dizziness. Across the room, the girl was struggling to her knees, her silver eyes wide in shock. The monolith was changing. The glowing glyphs reformed, shifting into an intricate pattern. The soft pulse of the core became a steady hum, growing louder, stronger. The hunter commander growled. "No, it's awakening." He turned to his soldiers. "Secure the core. Kill the outsiders." Ray barely had time to react before plasma bolts rained down on them. He dove behind a fallen pillar, heart pounding. This just keeps getting better. The girl crouched beside him, her breaths coming fast. "We need to stop them." "You got any bright ideas?" Ray reloaded his blaster. She hesitated, glancing toward the monolith. Her voice caught in her throat. "It's calling to me." Ray blinked. "Wait, what?" She looked at him, eyes filled with a strange light. "The core. I can feel it." Before he could stop her, she stood and walked toward it. "Hey, that's probably a bad idea," Ray shouted. The hunters saw her and opened fire. Ray cursed and leaped from cover, blasting down a drone before it could hit her. The girl didn't stop. The closer she got, the stronger the monolith's glow became. Then she touched it. A brilliant flash of energy erupted from the core, consuming her in a swirling vortex of golden light. The hunters staggered back, shielding their eyes. Ray barely held his ground, the force of it nearly knocking him over. Then, as suddenly as it came, the light faded. The girl stood at the center of the monolith's platform. But she wasn't the same. A golden pattern now traced along her skin, the same markings that had covered the ancient walls. Her eyes glowed with pure energy. The hunter commander's voice trembled with fury. Impossible. The girl lifted her hand, and the chamber obeyed her. The glyphs in the air spun into motion, forming a barrier of light between them and the hunters. The ground beneath the aliens shifted, stone tendrils rising like roots to entangle their legs. Ray stared in shock. Okay, that's new. The girl turned to him, her voice layered with something ancient and powerful. We must leave. Now. The monolith pulsed behind her, its power fully awakened. Ray didn't need to be told twice. The entire chamber began to collapse, and the hunters were trapped. Ray grabbed the girl's hand. Hope you know where we're going. She smiled faintly. I do now. With that, they ran, escaping just as the core unleashed its final, unstoppable surge of power. The tunnel shook violently as Ray and the girl sprinted through the collapsing ruins, their shadows stretching under the golden glow that still radiated from her skin. Behind them, the monolith roared with ancient power, its final awakening sending shockwaves through the underground city. Ray could hear the screams of the trapped hunters, their once confident commander now fighting desperately to escape the very force he had sought to control. The stone tendrils continued to wrap around them, sealing their fate. But Ray wasn't concerned about them. He was more worried about getting out alive. Are you sure we're heading the right way? He shouted over the deafening rumble. The girl didn't slow down. Yes. The core. It's guiding me now. Ray cast a quick glance at her. Her entire presence felt different, stronger, more alive. The symbols that traced her skin weren't just glowing. They were moving, shifting like living energy beneath her flesh. He had no idea what she had become, but right now, she was their best chance at survival. Suddenly, a chunk of the ceiling gave way, crashing down in front of them. Dust and debris clouded their vision, and Ray skidded to a halt, coughing as he waved a hand through the thick air. Great. Now what? He gritted out. The girl didn't hesitate. She raised her hand, and the floating glyphs around her pulsed. The massive stones lifted off the ground, defying gravity as they rearranged themselves, forming a new pathway. Ray blinked. Okay, that's impressive. She turned to him with a small smile. Come on. They hurried forward, weaving through the shifting corridors. The deeper they went, the more the air changed. It was charged, filled with an energy that made Ray's skin tingle. Then, as they rounded a bend, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Ray skidded to a stop. Whoa! A massive archway stood at the chamber's end, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Ancient statues lined the walls, their carved faces worn with time. The air hummed with power, and the ground beneath them felt almost alive. What is this place? Ray asked, his voice hushed. The girl stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the shimmering gateway. The last refuge of my people, she whispered. Ray frowned. You mean a way out? She nodded. Beyond this gate lies the sanctuary my ancestors built. It's been hidden for centuries. She turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with certainty. We can escape through here. Ray exhaled, relief washing over him. Finally, a way out. But just as they stepped forward, a distorted voice echoed through the chamber. You will not leave. Ray spun around, his heart lurching. The hunter commander stood in the doorway, his armor cracked and battered, but his glowing red optics still burned with rage. His soldiers were gone, swallowed by the ruins, but he had survived. Barely. His movements were sluggish, his breathing ragged, but the weapon in his hand was still steady. Too steady. "You have stolen what is ours," he snarled. Ray tensed. "Pretty sure you stole it first." The commander took a slow step forward. "She belongs to us." The girl stepped protectively beside Ray, her glowing hand curling into a fist. "I belong to no one." The commander raised his weapon. Ray's pulse pounded. He knew he wasn't fast enough to draw his blaster before the hunter fired. But before he could even think of moving, the girl vanished. Ray's breath caught. 1 second, she was beside him. The next, she was a blur of golden light, appearing behind the commander in an instant. The hunter barely had time to react before she placed her hand on his chest. The glyphs on her skin flared brighter, and the moment her fingers touched his armor, a wave of golden energy rippled outward. The commander let out a choked gasp. His weapon clattered to the ground. His armor, once impervious to Ray's blaster, began to crack, not from force, but from within. The red glow in his optics flickered. His body seized, and then he collapsed. Ray stared, his breath caught in his throat. What the hell was that? The girl turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. "I just returned what was taken." Ray wasn't sure what that meant, but he wasn't about to argue. The gateway pulsed behind them, its light growing unstable. "We need to go," she said urgently. Ray nodded. He grabbed her hand, and together, they stepped toward the rippling surface. Just as they crossed the threshold, Ray heard the ruins begin to crumble, burying everything, including the last remnants of the hunters, forever. The sensation of stepping through the shimmering gateway was like diving into deep, cold water, except Ray wasn't wet. Instead, his entire body tingled with static energy, as if he had walked through a field of electricity. The world around him blurred into golden streaks, and for a moment, he felt weightless. Then, with a sudden jolt, he stumbled forward, his boots landing on solid ground. Ray exhaled sharply, shaking off the disorientation. He glanced around, expecting to see more ruins, maybe another underground structure. Instead, he was standing beneath an open sky. But this wasn't Earth. The sky above was a deep violet, swirling with streaks of silver mist. Towering crystalline structures stretched toward the heavens, their surfaces pulsing with soft, iridescent light. Strange, bioluminescent plants lined the ground, their tendrils shifting as if breathing. The air smelled different, clean, yet tinged with something unfamiliar. A gentle wind brushed past him, carrying whispers, voices, but not in any language he recognized. He turned to the girl beside him. Her glow had dimmed slightly, but her presence still radiated power. "Where are we?" Ray asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. "Home." Ray's breath hitched. This was her world. He took a slow step forward, letting the reality sink in. This wasn't just an escape. This was a sanctuary, hidden from the rest of the universe. A place untouched by war, by greed, by those who had sought to claim her power. The girl walked ahead, and Ray followed. As they moved, the very ground beneath them responded, glowing faintly with each step she took. It was as if the land recognized her. Then, in the distance, a structure came into view, an enormous, circular temple, its surface adorned with the same shifting glyphs that covered the girl's skin. The temple hummed, radiating energy, and Ray could feel its pull even from afar. As they approached, the whispers in the air grew louder. And then, they appeared. Figures emerged from the temple, tall, elegant beings with the same glowing markings as the girl. Their forms were slightly translucent, their eyes deep pools of light. They watched in silence as she stepped forward. Then one of them, a regal-looking figure draped in flowing robes, spoke. "You have returned." The girl bowed her head. "I was lost, but he found me." The elder's glowing eyes shifted toward Ray. "A human." Ray tensed, suddenly very aware of how out of place he was. He wasn't sure if they saw him as a savior, an intruder, or something in between. Before he could respond, the elder stepped forward and raised a hand. A pulse of warm light passed over Ray like a wave scanning him. Then the elder smiled. "You carry the echoes of our past," he said, "and the promise of our future." Ray blinked. "Of what does that mean?" The girl turned to him, her expression soft. "It means you're part of this now." Ray swallowed. He had only wanted to save her. He hadn't expected to change anything. But now, standing here, on a world he had never known existed, surrounded by beings of light and energy, he realized there was no going back. The elder gestured toward the temple. "Come, there is much to discuss." Ray exchanged a look with the girl, then nodded. Whatever this place was, whatever future they saw in him, he was ready to find out.